And now we get to hear it first from a company that actually designs ASIC chips, these elusive heating elements that make internet money. And joined me by none other than Skot 9000, instigator of the Bitaxe project. How many of you guys have a Bitaxe? How many of you guys have one of those awesome Canaan home miners, like the Avalon Mini 3, the Canaan Q, and the Nano 3S? If you haven't seen them, those are all upstairs on the shelf, so take a look. Hey, Mike.
Test.
1 second.
Test.
I'm going to put one of these chairs away. We don't need an extra. Hey, good to see you.
How's it going?
Great. Well, thank you for joining me, gentlemen. Where do we start? Dylan just went over controlling these Bitcoin miners as heaters. Leo, Canaan has decided to start making products that are marketed and sold as heaters with heating control. What kind of led to that strategic shift from a large company that has broadly made industrial ASIC miners, the first industrial ASIC miner, is that correct? Walk me through kind of that framework of what it took to get a large ASIC manufacturer to express interest and actually spend the R&D time to make a home heater.
Got it. It's a great question, and I'm very honored to be here with you folks. I guess it all goes back to our history. When Canaan was invented, it was built on the philosophy that the world has to know more about Bitcoin, and the pure value underlying Bitcoin is the decentralization. So back in 2012, our founder was designing FPGA chip solutions and open source them to the market for people to mine at home. But then there was a disruption in technology, which is called ASIC. And then people who, there was a Bitcoin talk forum. People on the forum were very worried that, the ASIC might disrupt they might disrupt the existing system and make people, unrealized of the 51% attack on Bitcoin network and deteriorate the value. So our founder dropped off his PhD degree in semiconductor and then started making the first ASIC chip to kind of combat with the, back then was like Butterfly Labs ASIC, which turned out to be a mess. But I think the team had 4 people, and we only raised like a $1 to $2 million. But they managed to make the first batch machines within a month and 2, and then purposefully send it to European, US customers because they didn't want Chinese local to get most of the hash rate. So they wanted the hash rate to be decentralized from day one. And they had set up a rule internally that none of the founding members should use any chip and miner to mine for their own business interest. So Canaan has been open source and more like a geek company from day one. But then Bitmain arose. Bitmain was founded by Jihan, who used to be a customer and couldn't get enough hash rate from us because we didn't want to sell all the inventory to himself. So he started to build out, he found some team, they found Micree and they had Bitmain. And Bitmain is more of an investor than an engineer company. So they build out all these massive deployment on the market, and that was kind of posing a threat to our business, right? And also we were big enough. We were trying to look for ways to help the employees of the company. So then we started to kind of narrow down from a chip provider or enabler into a system provider, because the system provider can get meaningful revenue and profits from the market, from customers. So and long-term short. So back then, most of our customers are individuals and families, right? And they were very brave evangelists who started the business from a hobby, and then turned out to be more and more profitable and sizable. And most of them turned out to be Bitcoin holders, because they were doing, very groundwork, and like very similar to today, similar to you guys. But then I think before 2018, Bitcoin miners had a very different form factor as today. All the power providers are, today they are called PDUs, but back then the power supply units are separate from the mining hash rate boards. So the boards can vary from 1 machine to 10 machines, depending on the generation you're running. Up until our 9th generation, all the manufacturers, back then was like so many manufacturers, all the manufacturers were using different form factors, right? And then when chip development became a bottleneck, because the increased R&D and the failure rate has encompassed the gains from moving from one generation semiconductor node to the next generation semiconductor node, and that make people really realize that it has to get more efficient, not just from the chip upgrade, but also from the system itself. So they start to make the machine more compact and make them industrialized, so that the customer will be hands-free, worry-free, and running these machines, software and hardware, and start to generate more reliable revenue, right? And so all of things happened. People start to design hash boards and control boards, and also the fans. All the PDUs are customized as opposed to copy from servers industry and that. So everything becomes so carefully detailed, and then that had changed the whole system in a way that industrialized miners start to outpace the home miners, right? So sorry about the long history.
That's a great run through of the history, because it does feel like Bitcoin mining started, as we've discussed many times, Scott, on the laptops, made its way to the desktop computers. FPGA was a brief stint in the history, and then it's very interesting to hear about who created the first ASIC, right? Like kind of like the Lord of the Rings, like.
Sorry.
Look what you hold, right?
Yeah, we were a very humble company. We try to contribute more to the society and to the community. We actually posted in most of our machines the code online, so people can theoretically download them and manufacture their own machines. But we need to do more, right? But why 2024? 2024 was a halving event, and that was like an awakening moment for a lot of people. Because before 2024, everybody was like, this is going to go skyrocketing to the moon. Everybody's going to be super rich. And people were not worried about the actual mining economics. But by 2024, what we saw are 2 trends. First, manufacturers like Bitmain and MicroBT, especially Bitmain, are stepping very aggressively into cell mining business. They have massive deployment in China, and started to have massive deployment in Russia, and which was very concerning, because we view geographic threats very seriously. We're a NASDAQ-listed company. We want to see more hash rate here in the free world, and Bitmain had a mediocre reputation, to put it lightly.
You heard it here first.
It's a competitor, so I might be biased, but we wanted to encourage more hash rate here, right? But then the problem is most of the miners here are, well, I don't want to say most of the miners. I want to say miners carrying the most hash rate here are public miners. So they have a responsibility to the shareholders, and they wanted to be able to generate meaningful profits. And the operation costs are not essentially the lowest in the world if you compare against Asia and South America. So here, a lot of customers were actually stopping expansion, which was more concerning. Also, there was this centralization of hash rate, which I just mentioned, from individual miners into industrialized miners. So that was the one triggering factor of us stepping more into the whole miner system, because we thought we could encourage more decentralized node.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like it's very important to Canaan, the company, decentralization, who's carrying the biggest share of the pie. As kind of the leader, Skot, in hacking these machines to get them to do whatever you want, what would you say, to have like a bit of a fireside chat here amongst the three of us, has been difficult, or what could Canaan do better, or all of the players in the industry? How does it feel like someone who's really trying to get under the hood and understand these things at the ASIC level? What kind of barriers are we still facing in that regard? Because it seems like this is a company that's very interested in supporting the home mining movement, bringing Bitcoin mining back to its decentralized roots. And so I'm curious what comes to mind.
There we go. It's on. Okay. This is a conference of people building, right? We're all here working on these amazing applications, right? Especially like heat reuse or taking advantage of waste Bitcoin. We've known about for a long time that was a thing. I think Satoshi even called it out in one of the original forum posts, is like that you can reuse Bitcoin mining for heat. So we've known about this for a long time. So I think a lot of people here are wanting to take advantage of that. And they're wanting to build on it and put mining into these applications, which we know it can work very, very well. But I think we're all running into these roadblocks, is that you can't build these machines with industrial miners, right? Those machines are not meant to be in a water heater. They're not meant to be a space heater. They're meant to be plugged in at an industrial facility.
But you can make awesome home products like they did.
Sure, yeah, and I think that's what we're all trying to do. And so I think the roadblocks that we're seeing is it's very, it's obviously incredibly difficult to make the ASICs, right? We're not going to be making ASICs, the chips. But what we can do is make these systems. And the roadblocks that we're seeing is access to the essential building block of these systems, which is the mining ASIC itself. Like even just buying them, getting a hold of these chips, there's electronics engineers, there's people who are very capable of building these systems, but there's this huge roadblock in actually accessing the chips. And it's in the electronics industry, it's very strange the way it works with these ASIC chips. I think a lot of the other electronic components, the manufacturers of these components, they want you to buy them. They want you to make a product that has 1 million of these chips in there and sell them, right? They will send a field application engineer to your office to show you how to do it. They'll give you designs. They'll give you a 1,000-page data sheet for a $1 part. Like, they want you to build products with these, and it seems very early, but in the ASIC chip market, we just don't have that. We don't have access to that, and I think that is a huge roadblock towards moving forward and doing a lot of these amazing applications and getting them out there and really decentralizing the hash rate.
Yeah. So, based on what Skot said, Leo, I mean, you kind of told the story about how Bitcoin mining became more industrial, following the carrot on the stick of the incentives. It makes sense, right? It was very profitable. The machines got more powerful, more efficient. A lot of R&D efforts go into this. But then, as Skot alluded to, the broader electronics industry, having chip accessibility and being able to control these machines, what kind of answers come up inside of a company that does all of this engineering? Because I'm sure as a publicly traded company, it's not as simple as us Heatpunks just banging on the door claim it to be. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's actually very clear. It's all mathematics, right? So I'm glad you brought up other industries' chips. I think one keynote about that is in most of the electronics industries, chip makers make the most profits because their margin ranging from 40% to 70%, depending on the industry. And their customers are massive producers or OEMs of these chips, which means the customer support embedded in the gross margin of these chips. It is not the same in this industry. First of all, it is very expensive, even more expensive than in the traditional chip industry because we're always on the cutting edge advanced node technology. So it cost us $30 million to tape out one chip. And second of all, we have a very tiny R&D team, right? So we have to kind of focus on resources that can potentially bring in businesses. We did do customization work with customers who wanted to design, manufacture machines with our own chips, and sometimes with our own control chips, sometimes with their own control boards, because sometimes they want the hash board to be swappable, so they can use other chips to test with this one single control chip. So we can do all of that. It's a mathematic question. So if you have MOQ, let's say it doesn't have to be a lot. It has maybe, I'm just making numbers, like 5,000 chips, right? And you can afford to buy the MOQ because you think you're going to have a market for that. We can back you up on that.
So it's a little bit of like a chicken and egg, right? Because we want the chips and the building blocks, as Scott said, so that we can build all of these products and unique applications, because they're all so different depending on where you live and what you're trying to do. But then also, as a large company that puts all this huge amount of resources into developing these systems, you have to justify the ends meet, right, to go and do that. How do we solve this? Like, which direction do we come in from? Do we have to, that brings me back to open source, right? If we knew how to interface with these machines, maybe we're retrofitting and desoldering as we're doing right now, Scott, for the Bitaxe and all these other products. But if we know how to communicate to the chip level and the firmware is open source, then someone can go build that company like Heatbit that's taking chips and rebuilding into a space heater product, and then maybe one day they will have the MOQ to justify. What do you think about that? Yeah,
that is a kind of interesting thing, right? You're talking about like, we need to have these high MOQs. It's a little bit of the chicken and egg problem. You're like, well, this Bitaxe industry isn't very big. We're not selling very many. But then on the other hand, it's like, we're not selling very many because we can't get the chips to make them, right? So it's like, what comes first? And I think that there does need to be a little bit of a leap of faith in the beginning to create this industry. I think we're all pretty convinced that this is going to be a big industry. But in order to get it started, right, there needs to be a leap of faith. I think that there will be, ASIC, Bitcoin mining ASIC chip manufacturers that will do that and kickstart it. We're at that tough point right now where it's like, I can't point to this number and be like, yeah, we're going to do, multiple millions of these a year, because we haven't started it yet. We haven't built it because it's so tough to get started. So we need that like first mover thing to change this paradigm. But I think we're actually at the point where 5,000 MOQ, no problem. If you send data sheets, like, let's go.
Yeah, sure. And I agree wholeheartedly of every word he said. I wanted to push internally to get more tutorial videos about build out a miner from the chips that we design. So I know. So remember, this current R&D team is a professional R&D team. It's different from our founding team. Our founding team were part of the community, open source community, right? And then most of them have shifted their interest into AI open source chips. So we were the first company that did RISC-V tape out on 7 nanometer, and I'm back on not 7 nanometer, but the first ASIC RISC-V driven edge computing ASIC chips. So we've been doing that for 8 years, right? We lost a lot of money on that one, but that was the commitment we made, and we wanted to keep on doing that. So I guess a lot of things lost in translation because we are an Asian-based company, right? So but now with the AI and all the tools, we could do tutorial videos and post them online and have like periodic seminars to answer questions. It doesn't have to cost our R&D a lot of time or resources.
I mean, I think that's an important point. Is you don't necessarily even have to do that, right? Like, look at the Arduino project. Obviously, that's not as expensive of a chip, but the Arduino project, right? It's like the community has made an absurd amount of tutorial information of basically creating new customers for Atmel who made those chips. I mean, Raspberry Pi is another good thing. There's podcasters out there who just talk about all day like the cool things you can build with this and how to do it and have classes and seminars. At the end of the day, selling the Raspberry Pi Foundation more of their chips, right? I think
of the OSMU community and the
Exactly.
Heatpunks. Like a lot of this work, as you just described, people would do it for you.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people here and in this community that would be more than happy to do it, right? We just need that first seed is like we can get access to these chips, we can get a data sheet, and then like at no cost to you, I'm telling you, it is going to go nuts.
Leo, thank you for being up here, by the way. Because huge round of applause for Leo and Canaan, because you don't get to talk to the ASIC manufacturers very often. It's very much a black box. You don't know what's going on behind a closed door for many of the competitors in the space. So we very much appreciate this. And I just want to, I'll throw a softball question out there. A company that's making home miners like the Avalon Mini 3 and the Q and the Nano 3S, and as someone who started with really a learning tool, the Bitaxe, right? Not intended so much to be a product and not a heater in any way, like a desktop tool to learn. How Heatpunk pilled are you guys?
I'm not tech savvy. I'm a communication and capital markets guy, corporate development.
Do you think that some of the larger manufacturers in the ASIC space, and Canaan in particular, I mean, I think it shows by, what was it, 850% growth in the home mining product sales I saw you guys post? That's amazing. Do you think the company is starting to take a bigger notice of the potential of heat reuse?
Yes, we actually did quite a few commercial heat reuse projects across the globe. We haven't done any in the US. It's probably because the US has a very segregated system in power supply. I'll take Nordic countries, for example. Marathon was just talking about it a couple hours ago. So in Nordic nations, especially Sweden and Finland, there are local electric companies that supply heating systems to every small town, and every town has like 3,000, 5,000 people. So every town is like 2 to 3 megawatts of heating requirement. Altogether would be 500 megawatts to 1 gigawatts potential market, right? So the key to do that is to really embrace the local protocols. You have to work with people who have connection and who know how to play the system, because they have the heat reuse subsidies from the government. They need to know. Every small town has a different municipal heat purchase agreement system. You don't want to be in the position to compete against the locals. So what we're doing here is, we know their requirement because they have a temperature indexed pricing system for the hot water. So if it goes to 75 Celsius, that's maybe I'm just making up as like maybe half a euro per 10 liter, right? But it goes higher to 80 degree or 85 degree. The price surge dramatically because they can use the same water to heat more household, right? So the price of the hot water is actually a product,
right?
And the hash rate and the Bitcoin becomes a byproduct, right? So in these scenarios, it's very different from today, but it sort of answers the question about what are we gonna do after the halving, right? Because one key component of mining is the power, the cost of power that you use for mining, and if you can use Bitcoin as a byproduct to the hot water, that actually diminished that question. We also did
exactly
other.
Well, and we were upstairs in the workshop. You missed it, Scott. Leo was up there in the room with me with the architects and the home builders and all the trades, and we were kind of whiteboarding out, what are all the steps we need to do to get this to work in North America, because selfishly that's where we are, right? And you're talking about the Nordic countries where it's a district location. That's a different problem to solve which works with the industrial miners, to loop it back into the open source and the kind of getting under the hood of the Bitcoin miners. I was a bit overwhelmed in that workshop, Leo. There was a lot of stuff to do, from integrating with BackNet to getting proof of case concepts to UL certifications to all these different ways to integrate into different heating setups. To me, Scott, this is where I'm gonna loop you in. To me, that says it's like it almost seems like an impossible task for an ASIC manufacturer to solve, and it's hyper specific to the jurisdiction. And so, how does that play into the open source building blocks that we need to go and tackle that ourselves? And what role does the ASIC manufacturer need to play? Is it just purely the chips? Is it firmware? Now that you maybe want to talk about Mugino a little bit, we'll talk about it tomorrow on a panel. But
I just want to say about the chips, like the world is a really big place, right? And all the jurisdictions have different rules, different economics, different target markets for these applications. And I think a wise ASIC manufacturer would sell chips to all of them, right? And let them build these systems and sell them in their places, and you take your profit off the top of all those chips. But this is an important point about the firmware too, right? Because like the economics of the location, the different controls that you're going to want to do, the different ways that you're going to want to use these machines, that requires a very tight integration with the firmware. And if you're a very large company trying to make a one solution fits all type thing, it can be very difficult. You either have this just clown car situation of options that's confusing for nearly everyone, or it doesn't suit anyone's needs because it's too simple. I think that is where the open source kind of base layer on the firmware can come in, right? And it can provide this starting block for people who want to build these, and not just hobbyists or altruistic things, right? People build real products on top of this to make real money, but you don't have to start at zero and write a Stratum client and figure out how to talk with the chips, right? You can put the control on top of it to make money for your particular market. And I think that the firmware is being open. That isn't taking away from anyone's hardware sales or anything. In fact, it's just increasing it, right? The more people who are cool, I can buy this hardware and I can write my firmware on top of it, of course I'm going to go with that one that supports open source firmware.
Totally. So, Leo, I mean, we've been sitting here as Heatpunks trying to do this stuff. We have this long litany, this big list of, I would love to do this, I'd love to do that, but we really don't have the inner workings of designing these systems, all the R&D and the work that goes into that. What would your advice be to us, aside from go get 100,000 MOQ, because I don't think I can get that anytime soon, what could we as Heatpunks trying to build products, systems from residential, think space heaters, all the way up to district heating as you described, what would be useful to kind of show the market, show Canaan a company, right, that is building the chip, the heating element that makes money, the core piece? What do we need to do to convince the manufacturers to kind of work with us so that we can start to build these systems?
Okay, let me start with the last question. What do you do to convince the manufacturers? I don't think there's anything you can do to convince Bitmain.
That's probably true.
Fact.
I give you a very simple example, right? So I joined this company in 2021. So when I was in the US touring our customers and stakeholders, none of them would like to work with us. They knew our machines are superior. They just didn't want to work with us. And why? Because they were forced to sign all these bilateral exclusive agreements with Bitmain, right? So in order to tape into the market, so that was the chicken egg thing for myself back then, right? So you need to, in order to help people make money from maintaining your machines, you need to give them an MLQ, right? We don't have an MLQ because we don't have a market. We didn't have a market. So when we didn't have a market, we could not afford to give people to sign up with the people, especially when people have exclusive agreement with Bitmain, right? So if you don't have maintenance, then you couldn't sign into a big customer because they were afraid that your machines will be out of warranty, or in time nobody's gonna help them maintain. So that's the chicken egg thing. So how do we solve this, right? So we went to visit Cypher. Cypher liked us better than Bitmain. there's been some back and forth, but then they selected us as their provider, right? And then starting from that point, we started to build out an ecosystem and be part of the bigger mainstream. So I guess that was the lesson I learned from my experience. I think what I heard upstairs about proof of concept is very important. Because engineers have very brilliant ideas every day, right? They have ideas every day. How do you bring an idea into a business model? You have to test it on a smaller scale with an existing customer who are willing to pay for it, right? So if you talk to our salesperson, the first question, let's say I talk to someone here, and I bring this to our salesperson, and that Kevin over there, he's very interested in working with us. And the first question I get from our salesperson is that, how much money can he pay? So if you work with the system here, you want people to pay for the work. You want to understand their business. You want to understand how they make money, right? How is your work help reduce their workload and help them be more profitable or scalable, right? I think that's the value we could provide. Every company has to ask themselves about.
Before getting into the Bitaxe project, I worked for a long time designing IoT products for startups. And it was a lot of novel use cases, a lot of new prototypes, testing out new markets, right? They were operating on seed funding. So, you know, you can make up numbers about how many millions you're going to sell per day, but all of these companies were small, and most of them fail, but some of them get really big, right? We've seen that time and time again, like small upstarts come out of nowhere. But I think, if you can develop a program by which you can get anyone who's interested in a couple samples of chips and a data sheet, right? Maybe 80% of them fail, but it doesn't take many unicorns to make it all work out, right? And it's a low-cost way of basically investing in those who want to grow, and they will obviously build on top of platforms, on top of chips that they can get access to.
Yeah.
It's another chicken and the egg thing, where it's like, I can't tell you how many millions I'm going to sell. Like, ideally a lot, but.
Yeah, Brett.
Yeah, let's.
So you said that, like, there needs to be a product out there, and that product needs to be able to buy these chips, right? How are people supposed to, because, like, you could desolder chips off, you could buy a Canaan machine and desolder chips off of it and do whatever, but how are people supposed to build these products if they can't actually make use of the chips? Like, how are you supposed to do that without documentation?
You asking me?
For me?
As someone who's tried to do it without documentation, is this a hard thing to do?
It's incredibly hard. I mean, it's like I spent an embarrassingly long time trying to figure out how to use the Bitmain chip. So I think it's a non-starter.
As I said, our R&D team is a commercial R&D team. They just started to learn how to open source it this year. So all of our codes are out there on the network. You can download everything, but they're very less tutorial. They're less manual, and there are less data sheets that will help you. So unless you are really genius about it, you just download the code and do everything from a clean slate. You would appreciate it help. So I'll try to make that happen. I'll try to. Well, one of this is language barrier, as I said. They speak Chinese. So but it doesn't have to be on time. It can be recorded video, translated by machine.
Yeah.
And I'll try to do this like on a regular basis, so people can ask questions. We can sit down with our R&D team and let them answer the questions. Right. It's assets on the internet. Right?
100%. And I just want to say, we so much appreciate having this conversation with an ASIC manufacturer. It's a pleasure to have Canaan up here. I mean, this is awesome to hear, because we as outsiders see, wait a second, they're making home miners. That's what we want to do. That's so cool. Why are they doing that? I think you have a huge opportunity kind of to be the underdog in terms of market share right now, but to cater to a large, growing, emergent industry of Bitcoin mining, which could be hash rate heating, solar monetization, all this fun stuff, all the hacking. And so I just want to say thank you for being up here. And it sounds like if anyone has any more questions, please come find someone from the Canaan team and Skot as well. Andy, we got to wrap here to go to the next one, but please go ahead. We should continue this discussion about a program to get some samples, I think. That'd be fantastic. But let's give a huge round of applause to Skot and Leo here. I mean, seriously, I haven't been in Bitcoin mining very long, but you never get to have these kind of discussions, so thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.